Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about 7-tooth floating rim sprocket versus 8-tooth floating rim sprocket. But first of all, give you a bit of background information on some of the steel chainsaws. Typically the floating rim sprockets are better than the standard type sprocket for a number of reasons. And one of the main reasons is that they're much cheaper to replace when they wear out rather than replace the whole clutch cover assembly like that. That's one reason, right? There is another reason why these are more popular. If you throw a chain on a standard sprocket, the sprocket teeth can chew up the drive links and damage them. And then you've got to file all the damaged teeth, and I've done that before. So you'll find out, generally speaking, on your pro saws or your better high market saws, that they're fitted with floating rim sprocket. Now, generally speaking, MS261, the pro saws have these all the way up to MS880, and they come standard with 7-tooth all the way up. That's right, 7-tooth even on the MS880. Why is that? Well, MS880 is purely a felling saw, or a saw to cut up large timber after you've fallen a large tree and you need to cut it up into sections. You'll generally use a large bar. So if you've got a large bar, 59 inches, you're going to need all the torque that's available to cut that up. So you wouldn't go to an 8-tooth sprocket because of the torque. So where would you use one of these? Well, generally speaking, if you've got a powerful saw, 80 cc's, 90 cc's, and you're running that with a shorter bar, 25-inch, 20-inch bar, you can quite easily swap up to one of these, because you've got a lot of reserve torque and horsepower on an 80cc or a 90cc saw with a shorter bar, but you certainly wouldn't do it on a chainsaw with a longer bar. You want as much torque as possible in that situation. Now, a few things that can happen when you go to a 8-tooth sprocket. First of all, let's just say that you're free spinning, no load, doing about 12,000 RPM. On a 7-tooth sprocket, it's going to do about 1.2 kilometres. On a 8-tooth, it's going to do about 1.4 kilometres. 15% faster, right? Now, if it's 15% faster, that means it's going to cut 15% quicker. That also means that you've got more chips. So it means chip evacuation is going to be greater. You need to get rid of those chips. So, you can turn around and say, oh, I'm going to increase speed, but you've got to be able to get rid of them. In dry timber, where there's not as much moisture, and in timber that doesn't have virtually no sap or very little sap, the chips won't stick to each other and they won't cause any binding problems. In that situation, it's okay. But certainly if you were cutting down large pine trees that are full of moisture and full of white resin sap that can cause your bar to get jammed in and cause your chain to all jam up with resin, in that situation, you wouldn't run 8-tooth sprocket, and you wouldn't run a standard chain, you'd run a skip chain. Chip evacuation is critical on timber that's wet and timber that's full of resin, and if you've got a combination of both, wet timber from moisture and sticky resin, it's going to gum everything up and cause all sorts of problems, and that's when you wouldn't run 8-tooth. So 8-tooth is fine to run on powerful saws with shorter bars, and that's about the only situation. Now, I made one little mistake on my MS180. I went out and brought this conversion kit, right? And MS170, MS180 comes with a 6-tooth sprocket. So this is a 7-tooth sprocket. Means the diameter is much larger across here. So it's going to spin a lot faster by about 15%. The MS180 doesn't like 15% faster speed without changing the torque. On your smaller logs, you'll get away with it. But the moment that you cut, if you've got a 16-inch bar and you're cutting a 14-inch log and you run this setup, it's going to bog down a lot quicker than if you had a 6-tooth. The only reason that I went to this was because it's cheaper to change the sprocket out. Keeping the 6-tooth means I've got to change the whole clutch assembly. To my knowledge, I've never seen an aftermarket floating rim sprocket that comes in a 6-tooth. So I took it off. I don't use it no more because I want my saw to have as much torque as possible. So generally speaking, the manufacturer will use a 7-pin, a 7-tooth sprocket that comes out on most of the saws. We'll just focus that again, all the way up to MS880. And it's only if you run a powerful saw between 80 and 90 cc that you can swap this out with a smaller bar, all right? So you can go bigger when the bar is smaller. I've even got nine tooth in these as well. They've got 10s and 11s. Some of the guys that race, the ones that got racing chains with the big expansion chambers on them and everything else, they'll run 11s because they've got lots of torque. Even when we used to ride the motocross bikes, a good example of torque and horsepower was that when you reach the power band, if you had a motocross bike and you had that bike for climbing up hills, you would put a smaller sprocket on it. If you had a general all-rounder, you'd get more speed out of the bike, but it wouldn't be as good as climbing hills because you've reduced the torque. So the same principle applies to a chainsaw in situations where you require more torque, and that's going to be on longer bars and longer chains. You would use 7-tooth. And on the shorter bars and chains, on the powerful saw, you could go to 8s, even 9s. Certainly on an MS880, you could run 9-tooth, not a problem on a short bar. On 25, even 30-inch, you'll have no trouble running 8s and 9s. And that's about the only situation where you'll get away with it. So the manufacturer brings them out as 7 because they're the best all-rounder and they'll cover most situations. But when you get experience in this game, you find out there's a few things that you can do, especially when you're playing around with semi-chisel, full chisel, hexa, Husqvarna's X-Cut, longer bars, shorter bars, 058 gauge, 050 gauge, 063 gauge, 043 gauge. A combination of all these things means a lot of the times you can play around with these and get fantastic results, provided you know what you're doing and you've got the experience. And that's what it comes down to. So this was just a bit of a basic information. If you've got a powerful saw with a short bar, you could certainly run 8 or 9. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.